Morning Express it is. It's time for your money. I'll go straight to introducing our guest this morning, Patrick Wameo, who is a financial expert and a financial coach. Good to have you and good morning. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you.
All right. And now would like to cross over to Ashley Mazuri, who has already given us an idea of where she is. Today she's talking about shoe shining. And, this is, of course, a business that Kenyans in their entrepreneurship spirit have put together. However, today she is on two shoe shining people who have different brands, but together. Ashley Mazuri, please update us where you are and what is going on.
As I said earlier, I am at Kenya National Archives. With me here is Amos Ombati, aka the Prophet. He's going to be telling us more about what he goes on a daily basis, when he starts working, how many customers how many customers he attends to on a daily basis and how much he makes. Amos, sasa. Ni nini, ebu nieleze kwanza, mbona uko na headphones?
Headphones nisenye nimeweka kusikiza like some stations zile ambazo zinanikeep busy kama nyimbo nikiendelea na kazi yangu hapa.
So kawaida kwa biashara yako unaanza kazi saa ngapi?
Kazi yangu ya shoe shining naianza saa 12 nimeingia job. So saa 12 asubuhi then nachapa kazi through the day hadi jioni mwendo wa saa 1.
Per day unaweza pata customers wangapi?
Per day huwa na make customers like 30, 30 customers roughly. Kuanzia 20, 25, 30. Nikienda 35, that's a trial. Yeah.
Now, naona hapa uko na vifaa kadhaa. Kama unaweza niambia venye unavitumia, kama hii ni nini sana naona you use it ukieka kwa ankle ya customer.
Hizi zinaitwa socks guards. Socks guards ni kuzuia rangi zishike socks ya customer ama mguu ama trouser such like. So hiyo ndio kazi yake, socks guards. Yeah. Hizi zingine hapa niko na rangi ya kiwi na hapa niko na pia rangi ya black brown, then kuna rangi ya kiwi dark tan. Kuna brushes ndogo unaziona hapo, hizo ni za kuapply, zinaitwa applicators. Ni za kuapply kwa shoes. Kuapply kwa shoes ya.
Sasa kama tunaweza ongelea kuhusu branding. Hapa naona ni Executive Shoe Shine Shop. Na hapa huku nyuma ni Professional Shoe Shine Center. Kawaida biashara yenu inaendeleaje? Nyinyi ni competitors. Mnaelewana ama mnapigania customers?
Ama kwa kweli venye majina ya ni Divine, hii ni Executive Shoe Shine Company, then kuna pale Professional Company. Hizi ni kampuni mbili tofauti na zinafanya kazi, chapo ni same job but ni biashara. So biashara inamaanisha customer wa pale wanafanyiwa kazi venye yani it's about customer venye anaelewa kazi venye inafanyika, si mambo ya company. We are all shoe shiners, wale ni shoe shiners, sisi ni shoe shiners. Majina tu ndio yanatofautisha, hizi ni kampuni mbili lakini kazi ni same. Rangi wanatumia kiwi, tunatumia kiwi. Yeah.
Wanabiashara wengi hasa hapa CBD wana kanjo ufukuza. Nini mko na license, mbona nyinyi hamfukuzwi? Ni nini tofauti kati yenu na wanabiashara wengine?
Kama venye biashara yote ile mtu unaweza situate biashara yako mahali, kuna zile channels ama procedures unafuata kisha unaweka biashara yako mahali. So sisi hapa kama Executive tuko na license yetu na hiyo license ndio inafanya tuwe hapa hivi. Inspectors wanapokuja inspection wanapofanya, then wanakuja tunawapatia license yetu ile inatufanya tuko hapa, na kama vile wale professional wanapeana license yao. So we have a license for this business.
Na ni challenges gani mnaweza face kwa siku hii?
Zile challenges tunapata, it's like about competition. Kama vile mtu unaweza weka duka yako hapa mwingine pale, lazima kuna competition. But we thank God sababu we are inviting our customers wakuje, na ile kazi nzuri, the better service we provide ndio inafanya customer anarudi kesho. Hiyo challenges tunapata ni customers wako wachache sababu biashara of high demand.
Asante.
So,
Okay. Yes.
kwa hayo mimi ningependa tu kutoa maoni ya kwamba customers wale ambao tumefanyia kazi wanaalikwa wajisikie kuwa free na wamekaribishwa sana na wakuje kwa wingi kama mvua. Ndio sasa nasi.
Sawa. Asante. Well, Michael, you've heard from the executive side. I'll be crossing over to the professional Shoe Shine Center to find out more about what they do, what is so different between them and executive.
Lee, thank you very much for that. And we'll also maybe find out how weather affects their business, because of course that's something that is bound to affect them. And secondly, it would have been nice to see your shoes before and after. I'm sure you'll be looking at whether their services are good. But anyway, we'll come back to Ashley. But let me now come to Patrick Omeo, who's a financial coach, and look at that kind of a structure of a business, which is somewhat not very dependable, because you don't know how many people are going to come in. I'm not sure one can actually budget and anticipate how much is going to come at the end of the day.
Typically, in this kind of business, you work with the law of averages. The truth is that they will find a certain number of customers every day.
Every day.
That's
There's a
fact,
threshold.
because we are living in a society nowadays where certain things are more done by outsourcing than at home. And shoe shining is one of those things that people prefer to be done for outside than doing it themselves. There are people who are doing business who have a lot of time. They'll sit there between the transactions and have their shoes done. There are people who want to go and show a good face somewhere, probably in an interview. So there's definitely the demand for their services. That's for a fact, arising from a change in lifestyle and a growing middle class. The growing middle class always demand better services. And what you can see is a fairly well done structure that you would feel comfortable sitting on, no dust, no, the usual issues of concerns.
Right.
So they do have demand. Perhaps one may attract more customers over time through service consistency in terms of quality than the others. So that you can cover your fixed costs as early as possible in the day. Yes.
Now, for somebody who maybe would be thinking of putting up a business like this, I tend to imagine those who are possibly being interviewed, or those shining the shoes, are possibly not the owners. So it might be a good form of passive income if I set it up.
Yes, the typical business model is one where it works like a salon, where you hire a seat. In a salon, you hire space and the equipment. So people who work in a salon do not own the place. Someone else owns it. They just come with their customers. So it's the same model that works here. So each of those seats is hired. Like that Momanyi guy has hired a seat. He pays 600 per day for it. The average cost is 600, some 800, but average 600. So he works. End of day, they split in between the money is earned. 600 to the owner of the place, and the balance is. So the harder he works, the more he makes. If he keeps his quality of work, attracts more customers, he makes more money. The owner gets a fixed amount. So he's always better off. So you really have to save, because there are bad days when it rains. You've seen the structure, there's no cover on top. So if it rains, you might have fewer customers, not because the shoes aren't dirty, but they can't sit there.
They can't sit there.
So anything that is interfering with the peace disturbs the harmony of your work. So the monies of yesterday need to cover today and perhaps tomorrow's life. You need the safety issues of where to keep their inputs. Is an issue because the place is open. So you have to keep your tools somewhere else and bring them in the morning. So there's a market. There's a way they are able to survive there.
Would that be a good business for somebody to think about? And I'm thinking now in terms of somebody who would want to set that up as a form of income, because you have your consistent, if you have 4 chairs times, say it's 800, that's 2,400 on a daily basis, which is almost guaranteed. Is that a good business?
It's actually guaranteed, because the owner of the structure will be paid whether you make money or not. So as a business, as for an entrepreneur, I mean, given the kind of input, about 70,000 shillings to get the structure on, it's a good return.
Okay.
You will pay back in a very short time, perhaps less than 3 years.
In less than 3 years. And now for somebody like Momanyi, would that be considered a self-employed person or a business person?
He is self-employed. He is self-employed because he is the one who is there doing the job. He's the one who does the shining.
And the days he doesn't come,
So if he doesn't come in, his income goes with him. If he's in hospital, his income is in hospital bed. So he's really self-employed, and it's not a very safe source of income for him.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, for somebody like Momanyi who has a certain amount of money that is coming on a daily basis, it may not be much, but if you use it wisely and save it, it can actually end up being a very, very good source of income.
Oh, yes.
How does he ensure that that money is saved up? Because the other tendency, especially when you're getting bits and pieces coming in, is to also spend it in that same manner.
Good. And in fact, that's a challenge. The spending pattern of a person depends on what is already in their mind. So the ideal thing is to have very clear goals that you want to achieve, and then allocate a proportion of this income, perhaps not less than 15% per day. That is the portion of his income. If he takes home, say, 800 bob at the end of the day, then perhaps 200 bob per day should be set aside for his plan. Because if I were him, I would be working out owning the same thing. Perhaps not in this town, maybe elsewhere. But now I own the structure and rent it out. So that even as I'm shining here, I'm also receiving income from my structure. And that would not happen if he cannot save and borrow. And I would urge him to put the money in a SACCO that allows him to save up to his capacity and borrow according to his capacity, times 3 with the benefit of some guarantor, so that he's able to actually create some capital very quickly and create a similar structure, either for him working on one and renting 2, and then he's making money from the structure and from his own effort.
Okay.
That would diversify his
And why a SACCO as opposed to a bank?
A bank purely is a place to keep money. A bank doesn't give you the benefit of leverage. But a SACCO gives you the power to use the guarantee of others to access capital 3 times or 4 times your savings much faster. So if you have a good goal that is, an investment goal cannot wait for too long. So if there's space next to you and you think I should be able to cover this space, then time is of essence. Now, unless he goes to a microfinance, save and then borrow, the ordinary way of borrowing, he will not access the benefit of leverage. Even microfinance require him to go with others.
Okay.
The same thing that he will have to do in a SACCO. In a bank, you go alone, but you are assessed purely on your cash flow. Now, if you're only saving 200 bob per day, then your repayment capacity is below 200. So the amount of loan access is much smaller and might not be able to give the structure.
There's also an advantage with interest rates when it comes to SACCOs as opposed to banks.
Yes, significantly much lower. You're discussing approximately 12% to maximum of 15%. SACCOs are largely 12%. And so a SACCO would be a much better place for money, both in terms of quick capital formation, 2 in terms of good cost of money, and just the very relaxed way of doing things. Because you can pay a SACCO loan on Tuesday, on 5th, or as opposed to the bank where you must pay it on 1st. And that Momanyi might not make money on Monday. And I mean, it doesn't.
Monday
there are days,
might rain,
yes,
and maybe
it
it's not a
might
good
rain.
day,
So,
yeah, so
if he has to pay the loan weekly, some weeks might be really bad, and a microfinance may require him to pay weekly. Yet a SACCO will require him to pay monthly. So he has enough time to build up the money for the month, lower interest rate, and form capital faster and get his asset on the ground faster.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've mentioned the SACCO, and one of the things that one might also want to understand is chamas and how
Yes.
they work. We have ladies who are very good at that, where they gather money, and initially chamas were such that you'd collect 200 bob, then give it to one person, and whatever they do with it is up to them. But that has progressed to a point where now they can actually approach a bank and, with a business plan and all that. When you're running a small business like Momanyi, or he's self-employed like he is, what is your advice in regards to pooling together resources?
It works. It works. However, there's a challenge. The success of investment groups depend on a common tie or a common bond. People need to have a common interest. So the gentleman and say 3 other people who are thinking alike like him, they want, for example, to own that structure as a goal, or own structures, similar ones, even go to other towns, and therefore they have a motivation to do it. Then for that, it works for them. Otherwise, chamas formed on the basis of it is possible doesn't quite work, because you're saving up money, but the investment goal is missing. So there has to be a clear investment goal, and there has to be a good leader or leadership for some of these things to come through. So chamas is a good way to put money together, and particularly if they can face a SACCO or a bank at a chama, they will work much faster
Okay.
than alone.
All right, we'll go back to business, and if we have Ashley, I would also like to just hear from her. And this is in regards to branding. How important is branding when it comes to running a small business? Because one may think branding is purely for corporates, huge corporates. But we see a situation here where you have executive shoe shiners and you have professional shoe shiners literally next to each other. How important is branding in a case like that?
Branding speaks about the value that is being delivered. So it's not just the color. The brand represents a package that you are buying. One, as you could have seen there, the place is fairly neat, comparable to the others I've seen in town. It looks quite neat, and I hope they keep it that neat. Now, the moment you walk into that place and find it that neat, you feel comfortable about not soiling your clothes,
Right.
number one. Number two is the way they do their shoe shining. Just the whole interaction between you, the shoe, and the polish, the speed and quality of work. So if that brand represents that package, then it will cost a certain amount of money, different from somebody else doing a similar thing, fairly careless, dusty seats, unkempt, and that you find it even difficult for yourself to pay 100 bob or 10 bob more to the other fellow as opposed to this other one. So if this guy is charging 50 bob and the other guy is charging 40 bob, and you really care about not soiling your clothes, having your shoes done well, the gentleman is polished, the interaction is quite good, you perhaps will not feel that 10 bob or even 100 bob double. It's just the way we go for our kinyozi places. One charges you 500 bob, one charges you 1,000 bob. But
Yet
by the end of that interaction, you feel like that my 1,000 bob was properly used, because the hair is well done. There's no bumpiness. There's that package of value must represent the price. It makes it is actually a gap to try and brand the place with good colors and language, and then a disconnect in terms of the value proposition.
Okay. Would it then be accurate to say that the difference between one person charging more and the other is purely the brand?
Yes, where that brand is a package of value, because a lot of people mistake branding for just the color that it reflects, or the name that it stands for. That name, whenever you hear it, it needs to reflect in your mind a certain quality. And as long as it delivers that, you will. I mean, it's just like our banks. There are banks you walk into and in 5 minutes, you are happy. There are others you walk into and the names are big, but 45 minutes later, you haven't left the queue. And nobody really seems to understand you here. So you probably would rather pay more somewhere else than pay less and suffer more.
Okay.
Yes.
There's also the aspect of customer service, because that's something I find a little bit wanting in our market.
Yes.
How important is that for you to ensure that your brand actually grows?
In fact, the brand must reflect the quality of customer service that you're proposing. The moment you say executive, we want to feel that executiveness
has to come
in the
through.
service. If you walk typically into shoe shines in Nairobi, the one thing that they all do is speed. They are very speedy because it's a question of next. Now, in the process of that language of next, sometimes you feel cheated. And I think there has to be speed, but a balance between speed and quality work. Because if I don't feel like you did a good job, I was on the next, then the service becomes an issue, because that's the service I'm receiving from you. One, did I wait for too long? No, maybe I would be willing to wait if I love the service. I would be less willing to wait if the service is just like the neighbor next.
Right.
Because then you jump to the neighbor next. So this customer service has to be promised by the brand. The brand value is the quality of service that you are promising, and that is what will attract and retain customers. And that's what you will be charging differently. You are charging a few coins more, a few percentages more than your neighbor, because you are doing something different.
Okay. Now, as we talk about branding, there are many who probably relate branding to things like flyers, posters, getting awareness out there. Does one necessarily have to have that for you to have a good brand?
Those are, in marketing, we call those ones touch points. Those are the points within where the client interacts with you. So whichever touch points you choose to use It's not necessarily, I would not say that all touch points are necessary for all businesses. Certain touch points are truly necessary for some businesses. Where there's a bit of explaining required, you may have to perhaps write or put a screen there, you know, walking through the service. But certain services like Shoe Shine, you probably might not need to do a flyer. You just can speak about it. You can find a way of expressing the quality of work you do by, you know, either pictures or people who, for whom you've done work, the shoes you've done. You can do branding in very unique ways without spending too much time. I mean, you do a good job, take a photo of that, pack it right on your wall. As someone is passing, he's basically seeing a well-done shoe.
It's already an advert.
It's already an advert. So touch points basically must communicate what you do consistently. But whichever one you use, it has to be appropriate for the business you do. If I mean, I see a lot of people who give us, when you're driving, you are in a jam.
Yes.
People are giving you small pieces
Little
of paper
flyers.
that are supposed to relate to you. But the way they are done, you can't even read them. So the first thing you do is dump them somewhere. You're entering a supermarket, somebody's giving you a flyer that looks like a book. I mean, I am not in the business of reading a book.
Right.
It has to
Especially
be
if you're going into a
attractive. It has
supermarket.
to be point form, 1, 2, 3, something I will spend 1.5 minutes, and if it attracts me, I look at it
read
further.
more.
The next thing you do is dump it in the basket, when really it should have been what you're supposed to. So it's the preparation, is the communicative value. If that is poor, you say nothing.
Okay. Now, when it comes to setting up a business, a small business like now the Shoe Shine business that we're looking at, how does one go about searching the market and how viable it is? Because naturally we tend to think that, for instance, if I wanted to set one up, if this guy is making money, I don't even know what drove the idea of executive and professional being at the same place, yet Nairobi is so vast. How does one go about looking for this right spot to put it and the right business to put?
Now, let me start with where this guy is as we get out. Archives is a very busy place. All the traffic from
human traffic is
from
huge.
Eastlands pass through around the archives. So definitely the archives place is a hotspot for Shoe Shine business. Now, whether or not you are competing the people who have theirs inside the Hilton arcades is a different thing. Because how many people who are passing by the archives would dare to walk through Hilton? The Hilton arcade. I mean, some of them look at Hilton and they're like, that's not my place.
Yeah.
So the location of the business has to do with the client you are expecting as your suspect client.
Right.
I call them suspect because until they convert and begin to use your services, they are still not there. They are available in the market, but they might not necessarily come in. So the choice of location, the choice of where and how you brand the place has to do with the target client characteristics. These are typically people who do public travel, are going to offices, would like to look good, can afford an economy price, but can't afford too much. So again, you put your spot in a place where, one, they are passing so conveniently located, speed, cost, all those things must be right. So I mean, a typical kiosk person might not be able to use, I would call, a scientific way of arriving at the best way to profile a client. But they know a few things, like a lot of people are passing here. These people are going to offices, you can see their neat, and their shoes, people have stepped on them perhaps as they were boarding or leaving a matatu, or they have walked some distance, so there's a bit of, cleaning up required. So there has to be that natural fit between the market and the client. Now, scientific way is to try to get numbers. How many matatus are passing here in the morning? How many people are approximately, some numbers tend to work, but it doesn't need to be there. Now, the trouble is when you have 10 of them, then you begin to reduce the number of people available because all of you are sharing the same pool. So you have to find a way of differentiating yourself.
Okay, and now in terms of looking for that differentiation, is there a way one can ensure that everybody, the core business here is to shine shoes.
Shine the shoes, yes.
But how do you now, okay, we've talked about branding and maybe customer service, but is there a way of differentiating yourself such that now, rather than target the what everybody else is targeting, maybe you've targeted a higher niche?
Yes. Even at that place, at the archives, let's just take the people who are coming from Eastlands. That matatu is carrying people with different levels of income. There are people earning 200, there are people earning 150, there are people earning 100, there are people earning below 50. I mean, depending on the numbers, and you might not be scientific enough to tell how many of these are actually here, but you can choose to, like the way the guy did brand his structure, that speaks higher cost. It mentally, it speaks to people that we are high end here. So if you come in and find that the price there is 50 and your neighbor is 30, already tells you that that guy is not looking at everyone. He's looking at those from this place, but who can afford 50. Now, the danger is if you charge 50 in a place where the people who can pay it are too few, then you have a problem if you can't get enough number.
In the foot.
Yes. So there's nothing wrong with trying and understanding how many of these guys are here. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you need to adjust very quickly. When the market is not responding, you have to find where the real market is.
Okay, let's talk about profits possibly for this kind of business where you're getting very little amounts coming in, but they could also spiral to many once the volumes are good. And looking at how do you decide how much is actually a profit? For instance, we do know that the owner, like you mentioned, if he's getting 800 per day, it's easy for him to quantify and say per month, this is how much I pay the city council.
Yes.
This is how much I pay whoever. But now for the guy who's shining, how does he come up with a sort of scientific way of telling, this is my income and this is what I can rely on, to a point where he can now either take a loan or even expand his business?
It starts from his cost of living, because he is a labor. He's in the market, he's offering a service. Supposing he was hired, how much would he expect to be paid per day? So he has a cost of his 8, 10, 12 hours. He said he's there at 6 a.m., he leaves there by 7 p.m. in the morning. Those are 13 hours. I mean, what is the cost of 13 hours of labor? If you ask me, if you work for 13 hours in this economy and you're earning less than 600 bob, you are probably overhogging. So that would be the basis upon which you start. If I were hired, I would be offering this service for 600 bob minimum. So this guy begins to make money the moment he goes beyond 600. At 600, he's not made money. He's just done the normal labor. He's just met his normal cost of living. Again, if you go back to look at his normal cost of living, the expenses, he has to travel, he has a family to keep, he's got rent to pay, he's got bills to pay. If all those bills per day come to, say, 300 bob, 400 bob, or 500 bob, already then he needs more money to be able to say he's doing well. If the bills are 800 bob and he's earning 800 bob, he is not in the profit. He should look for something else to do with those hours. He's charging too low for his labor, so he needs to find something better.
Something better, or maybe increase the price per
yes,
shine.
For as long as the clients can carry that cost.
Finally, as we wind up, and unfortunately due to technical issues, we're not able to go back to Ashley as yet, but finally, as we wind up, for anybody who may be thinking of starting an SME or a small business like this, what are the do's and what are the rule of thumb? The thing that you'd look at and say, this you must not do.
I think when we were here last week, I mentioned something called a business model. Every business has a way it is delivered. We were looking at a kiosk where people eat last week. We are looking at a shoe shine
looked at
today.
a matatu.
We looked at a matatu. Each of those matatus do not have the same way of delivery. It's either the politeness of the makanga, it's either there's something they are doing that is attracting and retaining customers. Now, every business must desire to serve customers in a way that is different from the others. Number one, that's the first do. You are not in business if you are not serving your customers differently, because you will be the first person to lose the first client when the other neighbor comes in and offers better services. So there has to be what we call a value proposition. And that value proposition then define what you do, what we call operations. And those operations try to reach the client in the best way. And as you reach the client, you must maintain them. So anybody thinking business must ask themselves, how will we deliver? If you're selling clothes, do we take to the office? Do we call? Do we send someone? All those, there has to be a cost to it. So all that must be put in the price and ask, can our client pay that?
Right.
If you have enough clients who can pay this and therefore cover your cost, you are in business. You start worrying about how to bring more on the ground. The common mistake is people put in too much money in what you call the infrastructure. Like now, if that structure was Momanyi's, how much does it cost? Did he need it if he didn't have it? Could he have done that business, the same business, with just someone sitting in a stool under some roof for the time being until he has enough money to set it up? So the amount of money you put in the initial investment must be met by the size of the operation.
All right, I'll have to cut you short. Financial coach Patrick Wameo bringing us to speed and in light of how to start up a small business. And also, thank you very much, Ashley Mazuri, for being out there and showing us what Kenyans are doing out there to make sure they earn a living. This is where we wind up Morning Express this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. And do stay with us right here on KTN News. We've got Worldview coming up next. Do have yourselves a wonderful day. God bless.